Hello there everyone, Tim here once again with another book review, and today we are reviewing The Strange Story of Ahrinziman. As usual, I got it on Kindle. If I really like it, I like a physical copy as well. And when it says forgotten books, you know you're in for a treat, because these are the stories that somehow people have forgot that are truly powerful. So, The Strange Story of Ahrinziman. I'm doing a review because it was a good book. My good book streak continues, and I am grateful for that. It's hard to find a good. I know when you go through book droughts, how challenging it is, and yet somehow I'm actually anxious about my next book because this book was so good. Once again, it was written in 1906, but it comes from that genre that I cannot define and absolutely love. It's a channeled book. Don't even know who channeled it. It kind of hints towards the end that it was channeled by a group of people. But it's the genre which is not fiction, but it's not saying that it's factual either, but it feels very real and true when you've read enough books within this similar kind of genre of channeled telling someone's story from life, from the afterlife, which is essentially what this book does. It goes through the story of a Persian named Ahrinziman, although after it actually gives the details of who they think the real man actually was in real life, and that is he changed his name to Ahrinziman for the sake of the story. From his pre-birth, from how his mother and father met. His father was a king, his mother was a mistress, but very mediumistic, spiritually inclined mistress to this king. And they had this child which happened to be Ahrinziman. They had to hide him away, give him to some kind of farmers out in the country somewhere in Persia, and so he was raised by this. It goes through a story of, like I say, pre-birth, birth, early life, and then he gets kind of swept up into dark arts. He carries the same mediumistic tendencies that his mother had. He goes through this journey of, loving kind of nature and the land, and then getting caught up in dark arts and serving as an assistant to a very kind of dark, what we say, magician or occultist, basically deteriorating the condition of his own soul. Then it goes through to his actual death, through to the afterlife, his journey through the hells, and I'm not going to ruin the story for you there, but I've never actually read a book which goes from someone's birth to death, or what would you call it? Not death, but second birth into the afterlife, and then journey through the afterlife. Like the Wander in the Spirit Lands book, which this is actually a prequel to, and how I discovered this book. For those that don't know, I did a book review previously, and that's one of my favourite books I've ever read, A Wander in the Spirit Lands. There's a character who's a Persian guide in A Wander in the Spirit Lands book. This guy, Ahrinziman, it's his story of his life as a prequel to that. A Wander in the Spirit Lands was written just as a guy dies and journeys through the spirit lands, whereas this is someone's life, through life, death, afterlife. So I've never read a book like that before, so it's really, really cool to read, really fascinating. It's really beautifully written. It's not completely, I wouldn't call it Old English or hard to understand. They use the word thou a little bit, but it's not at all hard to comprehend. But just some of the language, the descriptive language, the way they explain things, and I'll give a few quotes here. I won't make a massive book review in this one. I'll try and keep it fairly concise. Here's a quote from his early life when he was aware of his mediumistic tendencies but still slightly confused by it. In the heart of the star I would see the most radiant angels, their white and glistening robes shining as though powdered with silver dust, and in their hands they would bear wreaths of silver palm with blue and white flowers. Troops of bright peri or spirit children would assemble and dance around me in the light of the star. Lovely maidens with long flowing tresses of hair and snow-white arms would glide in and out before me in all the mazes of the most graceful dances I have ever beheld. Soft trains of music would float to me, borne by some passing zephyr from the spirit land, and lovely glimpses of scenery like unto the white and glistening regions of some fairyland of the blessed would appear to my eyes for a few moments and then fade away to give place to another scene of delight. Then, on a sudden, my star would grow pale and dim and vanish, leaving me alone in the darkness once more. And so that just, I guess, speaks to him sort of maybe astral projecting, or, being in his lonely room and maybe an out-of-body experience. He's in that in between awake and sleep state where things are a bit more translucent, and I just thought it was beautifully poetically written and descriptive, and I think so many people on earth that experience, I don't know if they go as deep as that, but people have, astral projections becoming quite popular now, and I think that can speak to that. And I think it's also poignant that it was before he darkened his soul condition and got into kind of dark arts, so he was able to access these more beautiful potential realms or spheres of the spirit world, whatever it is, more paralleled, closer to the condition of his soul. And as we'll see, as his condition of his soul darkened, he got less access to those kind of beautiful scenes. And here, after a few years of studying the dark arts, he talks about essentially astral projecting. He doesn't call it that. It's don't know what they called it back in the day, but here we go. For the first time in my experience, I was fully conscious of the process by which a spirit can leave the earthly envelope to roam untrammeled through the earth plane. As I withdrew myself from my mortal covering, I felt like one who throws off a cloak, and after 2 or 3 slight tremors of the muscles, I stood forth in my spirit form, free from my material body, save for a fine thread of gossamer-like texture which attached me to it and kept it animated by my life fluid. So I think the fine thread he speaks to is the silver cord that connects the physical body with the spirit body, and that is him getting into that outer body, that astral body, the spirit body, to then traverse. And so next he goes on, because he was going to use it for actual dark intentions. As I rushed onwards, this is in the spirit body now, I saw that I was accompanied by a great train of spirits, weird creatures of phantom shapes, and the human spirits of dead men and women of evil lives. Onward with me they rushed, howling, shouting, crying, yelling out wild imprecations and fierce cries for vengeance upon all mankind, gesticulating like a set of maniacs, fighting with each other like a pack of wolves, laughing and screaming in fiendish joy at the thought of the sport which awaited them, waving their long skinny arms to cheer me on, and mouthing at me with their hideous faces, shrieking curse upon each other and upon me, even while each one struggled to get to the foremost place beside me, that they might the more enjoy the expected scene. If you're into spirituality, or especially if you follow divine truth teachings, you know that we're sort of always surrounded by spirits that influence us for good, for bad, and the condition of your soul kind of, in the teachings, the condition of your soul affects the type of spirits that can influence you, so the rapport you have. So the type of soul condition you have, other spirits that have a similar condition or similar injuries or similar passions to you can influence you in those areas. And so this speaks, as I say, his soul was darkened at this point, and he was rushing through in his spirit body, and he actually got to see all the spirits that surround him, that are probably surrounding him in the normal material life, but it's not as obvious, you can't see it. But in the spirit body, it was much clearer to him that there was this great train of spirits, weird creatures of phantom shapes, following him on his mission. So I don't think I'm ruining the story by saying, that hopefully I'm not ruining it all by saying, he lived, he died, and he's in the spirit land. But then there's just one, quite similar to Dante's Inferno, which I've just started now, the Divine Comedy. I think it's fascinating that there are other books within the same vein that paint this picture of the hells. There's not one hell place that people are into for all eternity. It's just a hellish land that's slightly ramped up version of what we have on earth. And he describes these 2 kings of the hells, or the dark spheres, when he sees them. How can I describe the faces of these 2 powerful dark spirits? How find mere words to express at once the all-pervading wickedness, the stamp of sensuality, of cruelty, of hatred to all things on earth or in heaven and hell, that was impressed upon their countenances? Or how describe the subtle charm they seem to exercise over all around them? How can I show to mortal eyes the strange perfection of form and feature that was yet so indefinably marred by the hideousness of the souls within? The language of man seems poor and expressionless when one seeks to show by its aid the ethereality and yet the tangibility of the spirit body, the strange likeness and yet unlikeness to the mortal form, the powerfulness of the personality and yet the aerial nature of its envelope. Only those who have once seen a glimpse of these angels of the dark spheres can fully realize how subtle and how great is at once the attraction and repulsion which they exercise over all who behold them. I just thought that was such a dark but beautifully written explanation of how spirits appear, and not just the clear physical form which can hide and house the darker conditions of the soul of some humans in the spirit body. The caricatures of those dark natures are greater expressed and visible, and I think he just speaks to that so poetically. The final quote, because I don't want to go too far into the book and ruin it, he's just explaining his journey, kind of coming out of hell into, we could call it purgatory if you want to follow Dante's Inferno. As I wandered on the earth plane and worked in the dark spheres, I would sometimes meet those whose life threads had been intertwined with mine own, and I knew that they also were working out their penance and gleaning the harvest of the seeds which they had sown. And that just sort of shows the work that he's having to put in the afterlife to repent for the sins and the dark actions he'd done on earth. And then the story continues from there. So one thing was interesting is he mentioned how many years had passed since he died from earth moved through the veil until this book was written. And I'm not going to ruin that for people that might want to find that out, but it was really interesting. The point of this story and the reason he's wanted to channel this and get this to earth, and unfortunately it's not got more traction compared to other books which, for my eyes, express things less logically and more cast in stone, certain religious doctrines about how life and afterlife kind of function, and that there's no hope of redemption if you've already made certain choices on earth. This book and the other books that I'm kind of pointing to show us that there is guidance about how to live, and there are warning signs about how to choose to live on earth, and that in order not to set yourself up for a whole heap of suffering while you're living, and then because life on earth can be hell as it is, and a whole greater heap of suffering beyond, and that there are hallmarks of character to work towards, that is to be compassionate and loving, to live in truth, to strive for humility, all things which are great to say and easy to intend day to day, but how often do I get sidetracked and pulled away from those things? And actually it only feels like only through the emotional work and the releasing of buried emotions within me that I'm able to make any progress at all and change in my character and have a deeper understanding of self and have greater, more loving aspirations, and potentially that there is a God, a creator that can be known, that can be felt, that can aid us in this process. To me, it paints quite a clear picture, at least an intellectual picture, about an understanding of a afterlife that we are designed to have, like a knowing that we're designed to be able to accept and feel and know to be true inside. And there's very few books that don't have bells and whistles and New York Times #1 seller on Amazon. These aren't those books, but they're there. And I'm grateful to Divine Truth who pointed me in the direction, and some of them, the Padgett Messages and Autobiographies of a Soul in Paradise, they're the ones that got me into this, and they're the ones that maybe fully align more with divine truth and God's love. And the others are kind of a bit more fringe that touch on these subjects, but that still help to paint that picture for me, that have given me much more faith in things to come and a lot less fear of it. And it's helped me to really focus on, especially with the last few years and how crazy it's been and how much that's brought out of the injuries in my soul and the anger at the way the world is right now, to soften and to recognize that it doesn't help if I'm projecting my own pain at others, and that my own sole task right now is to focus on my own healing and the love that I can bring to the world. And thanks to obviously the Divine Truth teachings more than anything, which has helped me to focus on that. But these books as well have just been a great supplement to help remind me and to know and to give me those warning signs. If you are making unloving choices, and again, sin is a dangerous word for many people to hear. It just simply means to miss the mark of love, right? when I'm doing that, I don't know, I don't want to feel like I'm preaching, and I feel like I'm preaching. So I just want to say, these books are beautiful. I'm really grateful to have discovered them. If people want to check them out, if you read a few of them, it's quite special what the picture that starts to appear about what's to come and the direction it can give you for your life. So I'd recommend checking it out. The Strange Story of Ahrinziman, A Wander in the Spirit Lands, Autobiography of Souls in Paradise, The World Unseen. Truly special books, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.